Hi, Dave. So this is Mature Muscle. Thanks for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
So we're going to be chatting about TRT today, and I thought you'd be a great person on to give us the lowdown. So can you give us a little bit of a breakdown of yourself and who you are?
God.
And
God.
No, I don't want it from high school. just to give us a quick lowdown.
So I started using anabolics for a point of view as a bodybuilder when I was 19. I used up until 24. Then I had a very long break, then went back to it when I was 38, somewhere around there.
Right.
And then I decided to see how big I could get. Now, my first dabble into anabolics, I had no idea, even though I used for 4 years, didn't have a clue what I was doing, didn't understand anything. When I came back to it, I decided I was going to get a bit more knowledgeable on the subject. And then I started experimenting on myself. That's what became the Under Construction projects, which there was 2 documentaries done on, and I went up to 415 pounds. Yes, very large. 26.5-inch arm, 74-inch chest.
74-inch chest.
Very, very large, very strong, also very unwell. The stress of both the size and the drugs. I ended up with kidney failure and heart failure, which I still have to this day. I'm stage... Hang on, I always get mixed up which way around. I'm stage 3/4 kidney failure at the moment. I've managed to improve it slightly. And I still have heart failure. That's something that's probably never going to go away. But anyway, off the back of that, and all that time of that experiment, I was getting more and more knowledgeable on drugs and getting more known for being knowledgeable on drugs as well.
Yeah.
And then we got into blood testing. Now, I set up a harm reduction company some time ago, not because I have an ex-smoker's attitude where I think I should save people from the demons of steroids, but just a case of, look, I've been there, I've done it, I've lived it. I know the social drivers, I know the emotional drivers, I know the mental health aspects of it all. And it's a case of you can do what you want to do, but just be aware of the risks, then you can make an informed decision. So I'm not pro-drug, I'm not anti-drug. I feel it's very much an individual's choice, but I do think that people need to be given as much evidence and information as possible so they can make an informed decision, so they don't sit there in 5 years' time having had a problem and gone, well, I didn't know this was going to happen.
Yeah.
As an extension of that, we started blood testing. That company's developed quite strongly. That's Eval. We've just opened our own pathology lab literally this week.
Fantastic.
And then off the back of that, we started doing or providing TRT, but we are very, very strict in who we allow to qualify for it.
Yeah.
And that's mainly because we generally work in the field of steroid users. I mean, Eval is a blood testing company for people with alternative lifestyles. So we deal with DJs, we deal with all sorts of different people that do things that they probably shouldn't really do if they want to be healthy, but are at least responsible enough to keep an eye on things and take caution and try and do preventive measures so they can still enjoy their lifestyle choices without suffering too adversely from them.
Makes sense.
And so that's where Eval's gone with that sort of thing. But off the back of that, we did start TRT. But because we work massively in the field of bodybuilders and steroid users, we do it by invite only for the simple reason that otherwise I'd have every Tom, Dick and Harry that uses gear wanting to get on so they could get pharma scripts. And it's like, it doesn't work like that.
Right.
If anything, we're probably a little bit more anal than your GP is in a lot of ways. Though we have a broader qualifying spectrum, we are stricter on the regular blood testing and all that sort of thing.
Right.
And so
people would come to you if they don't want to maybe discuss what they're doing with their docs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, over the years, we've developed a reputation for having a good knowledge base and being, I think, practical with what we advise. But also, I've always been a big believer in, you get a lot of people in this field that use the longest words possible because they want to sound clever. They want to promote their own intelligence. And that isn't useful to people because people don't understand what they're talking about.
Yeah.
So I've always tried to keep things very basic, very simple, so that the average person listening doesn't get confused behind loads of terminology.
Excellent. Yeah.
I mean, there are, unfortunately, certain things have certain names. That's what they're called. You can't get away from the technical names of stuff. But
Yeah.
I tend to try and keep things nice and simple. And that's where we are. I mean, I'm recognized as an expert in the courts in the field of steroids. I work for the MSRA. I work for the ACMD, which is Advisory Council on Misuse of Drugs. I'm the chairman of the Public Expert Advisory Board for ASUK, which oversees all steroid research in the UK. I work with John Moores, Liverpool Uni, Leeds, Manchester, Birmingham.
Oh wow! I didn't know that you were that involved in on the
several police forces, prison service. There's quite a long list of stuff that I do, and yet I have no qualifications, which ruffles feathers as well, because people can get a bit funny about that.
You want some letters after your name, don't they?
Well, the thing is, I've deliberately avoided that because the problem is with that is it's very restrictive in what you can and can't say.
Yeah.
Where without that, I can say what I want.
Yeah.
Within reason. Don't get me wrong, I'm very conscious of trying to give out correct information, but I can say what I want. I'm not bound by the Hippocratic Oath. I'm not bound by, I can say you can use that drug off script to do this, you can do that, and you can do the other. I couldn't do that if I was medically qualified. It wouldn't be allowed to.
Yeah, totally get that. So if just for those who may be listening to this and they don't even know what we're talking about with TRT, so we explain what that is as well. Do you mind just quickly explain?
Yeah. So TRT to the average person is testosterone replacement therapy. It's where your natural production has got to such a level that it is too low to support normal function, or it is the region of low areas where it's having an impact on your well-being and your life. Within the NHS, they will only prescribe TRT if you are out of clinical range, but symptoms can start for most people in the bottom sort of 10% of range, even as high as 20% of range. So the clinical range varies depending on age. If you are under 45, then you're looking at roughly 8 nmol. Nmol is a measurement of testosterone to 29 nmol. And if you are over 45, then you're looking at 6.5 to 25.
Yeah.
Most people will start to see an impact on their quality of life at anywhere from 12 downwards. And most private practice will offer support at 12, 11 downwards.
Right.
It's a balance of where you are clinically within the clinical measurements and how you actually feel in your day-to-day and your well-being.
Yeah.
But it involves either via injection or gel, supplementing your natural testosterone production with an artificial testosterone. However, and this is the big caveat with TRT, TRT is for life. It's not something you can pick up and put back down. When you start taking testosterone as a medication, you do stop your natural production. If your natural production was already weak, the chances are you'll permanently damage it, so it won't work. So it's something that needs to be considered very seriously because you are going to be using that drug for a very, very long time.
Hopefully. Yeah. That's perfect, mate. Thank you. So just why does testosterone drop? That's the question. So obviously it peaks in, when we're in maybe 20s, 30s, and then starts to kind of gradually drop off, doesn't it? Why does that happen?
There's lots of causes for reduction in testosterone level. There's been a decline in national averages over the last century. And to be honest, a large factor of that is the way we live. It's modern living. It's technology. It's the stress that technology brings. Poor sleep, high stress will lower testosterone levels. Alcohol consumption will lower testosterone levels. Alcohol will lower it immediately for up to 3 days. It can take for test levels to recover post-alcohol, but regular alcohol use will actually damage testosterone production. It declines with age. And some people just unfortunately aren't in the way is you get some people with big ears and some people with small ears. You get some people with poor testosterone production and some people with good testosterone production. As an example, as I said earlier, the upper limit is 29. I am literally in discussions with somebody who has a client whose natural testosterone is 42.
Right.
There's concerns about that because that could be driven by a tumor or a growth on part of the endocrine system, which is the hormonal system. But so, there is a wide range of people and their hormone levels. But for a lot of people, damage occurs due to lifestyle.
Yeah.
And taking recreational drugs and taking steroids will also damage your natural production. So all these factors play into it. But most people's lower levels of testosterone are lifestyle. And a lot is just modern living. It's just the life we live these days. Eat faster. It's just a different style to what it was 50, 60 years ago.
Yeah. Excellent. So it seems the beginning, the first part of it would be to get some blood work done then. For if anybody's out there considering this, the first thing you need to be looking at is exactly what's going on with your own test.
I mean, the real only route is you may feel like you've got low testosterone, doesn't necessarily mean you have. And many people will suspect they have low testosterone when in fact it's not, it's other factors of their life. But at the same time, and depression being a factor, at the same time, lots of people get prescribed antidepressants when actually they have low testosterone. So that's a two-edged sword. It goes both ways.
Yeah.
So these things aren't things that you can guess at because of the way you feel. Don't get me wrong, feeling will give you an indication there may be a problem, but you really need to do a test and see where you are. And then off that, and you have to be sensible about the test as well, in the sense that if you went out on the beer all weekend and you test Monday morning, your test levels are going to be low.
Yeah.
So you need to be conscious that you've not done anything that's going to artificially suppress your test and give you a false low reading.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people think that testosterone replacement therapy is I rub a gel in every day, or I take an injection every 2 weeks or every 8 weeks or several times a week, depending on what protocol you decide to use. They forget that there's regular blood testing every 3 months for the first year, every 4 to 6 months thereafter. There are side effects. They can cause problems with cholesterol, particularly HDL. It can cause the blood to thicken, and these increase cardiac risk. So it isn't a case of, I just do injection and I feel fine. There is quite a lot of management behind testosterone therapy that needs to be done if you're going to be responsible with it.
Yeah. Yeah, excellent. So if we're looking at what would be if you were to have a blood test done, because obviously free testosterone is very different, isn't it? So we're looking at the markers. If you were looking at your markers, what would you be looking for?
So generally speaking, in an ideal scenario, you would test total testosterone, which is what those ranges were I was discussing earlier.
Yeah.
Free testosterone, FSH, LH, SHBG, and estrogen. And the reason you do so many of the markers is LH is your signal hormone for producing testosterone. There are alternative treatments if LH is low. It may be that your pituitary output of LH is low, but your actual Leydig cells that produce testosterone function perfectly normal. There's a product called HCG that you can use in that case, which is synthetic LH. And that will stimulate Leydig cell production into testosterone without having to go on to actual testosterone. The other factors are people can feel like they've got low testosterone, where their total testosterone levels are good, but their SHBG is incredibly high. And as a result, their free testosterone is low. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean you need testosterone replacement therapy. You can use over-the-counter supplements like boron, which will actually lower SHBG and create more free testosterone.
Yeah.
So a lot of people just go for test, and it's not that it's not a usable result, but the more markers you get, the better picture you can paint, and the more options it may open up to you in the way of treatment.
Excellent. So you mentioned that the kind of levels you're looking for earlier, but if you're trying to, correct me if I'm wrong here, but you're trying to kind of simulate a position where you'd be in your 30s, yeah, around the 30-ish, so it's around 30
38 or
millimoles.
30? No, that's too high.
Oh, is it? So what would you be aiming for?
I would say if you want.
I know it's not a
Well, the thing
one size
is,
fits all.
so for clinical support, 20 to 25 is a very, very good range.
Right.
When you start going near to upper end of range, you start to put more pressure on the systems that are affected by testosterone. So if you ran at 30, which is literally 1 mmol above range, though it doesn't seem a great deal, what you've got to remember is that your body naturally peaks and troughs quite dramatically during the day. So you have a peak early morning when you're first up, and then by about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it tanks.
Yeah.
When you're taking artificial testosterone, those you don't get those peaks. It tends to be more stable.
Right.
So if you're sitting at the upper 20s, so like 29, 30, 31, you're there all the time. As a result, that's going to lower HDL.
Right.
That's going to thicken blood. Then you're going to start needing bloodlets to manage blood thickness. Then your side effects of thick blood are lethargy and tiredness, and then you start getting oxygenational problems at rest. Though you're okay when you're doing something, when you're resting, you'll start struggling with oxygenation because your blood's too thick to move around your body correctly.
Right.
HDL is incredibly important in long-term arterial health. So if HDL is low, you don't, literally putting it in very layman's terms, you don't have the cleaners in operation to keep your arterial network clear. And as a result, you increase the risk of plaque buildup.
Right.
And so 5-10 years after you've started your TRT, you can end up with an MI, a myocardial infarction, which is basically plaque blocking off and blocking an artery.
Yeah.
Heart attack in common language. So you've got to be a little bit careful. It's very tempting when you're in control of anything that boosts how you feel. More is always better.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like I said in my opening sort of words, it's about educating people of the risk to reward ratio. Only they can make the decision on that. So if you're talking clinical, 20 to 25, NHS will keep you probably 15 to 20 because it's much easier for them. But 20 to 25 will give you a very good balance of youthfulness from what would be mid-20 levels, as in 20 years of age levels of testosterone.
Right.
Without pushing too close to the top end that you're going to start to develop these negative side effects. Right. When you start getting up at range, then you start having a little bit of a seesaw balance that you've got to work with side effects like thick blood and low HDL. And also you've got to remember the impact on the prostate as well.
Yeah.
So I would have run slightly lower. You can run higher.
Yeah.
But you just need to manage these factors.
Gotcha. So symptoms of test, you mentioned depression, and that's how it's often misdiagnosed. I hear that a lot. Is there anything else that you could be aware of, and all of a sudden start to put the connect the dots?
Certainly. So fatigue, lethargy, poor sleep, poor concentration, fat gain, low libido, erectile problems, particularly around sexual function and sexual desire. So if you go into your GP and you feel you've got low test and you've decided you're going to try through the GP, it's very important that you specify sexual issues.
Yeah.
Because everything else they'll tie up to depression, but they can't do that with sexual dysfunction. So if you say, I'm unable to sustain an erection, or my erections are soft, or they're infrequent, excuse me, then that points them very stronger towards hormones, and it stops them from saying, oh, look, here's some antidepressants, see you later.
Yeah, which is just an offload, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it's, the NHS, they're under pressure, they're underfunded, they're understaffed. Doctors have 10 to 15 minutes for an appointment with a patient, and they have over 15 minutes of paperwork to do for each patient. Yeah. So, they're losing before they even start. So, you do tend to get them in, get them out.
Yeah.
I mean, my personal doctor, you're only allowed to go with one complaint.
Yeah, that's it. I would the same. You've got
Yeah,
if you mention something else, they'll say, "Oh no, you need to rebook."
yeah, it's ridiculous. It's like,
Yeah,
no, we only deal with one. Oh, for
yeah.
fuck's
It's like
sake.
Jesus. Okay. So you mentioned estrogen earlier, which is really interesting because
Oh.
it might come to a surprise of a lot of people that men actually have estrogen as well, and likewise women have testosterone at much lower levels, obviously. But so can you just explain why it's important to test for estrogen as well as a man?
So estrogen plays some very significant roles in our well-being. We get problems with high estrogen, but we also get problems with low estrogen. So low estrogen is going to result in a diminishment of eyesight, emotional instability, possibly joint pains. High estrogen will add things like water retention, emotional the other way, so you become very, very sensitive, and fat gain or fat storage, should I say, in what we would call a female pattern, which is upper thighs, hips, arse, lower stomach, that sort of areas.
Yeah,
The reason you see heavy beer drinkers with the beer belly
yeah,
is because alcohol not only lowers testosterone levels, but it actually increases estrogen levels. Now, in
yeah,
a male, all estrogen comes from testosterone. So what alcohol does is massively convert test to estrogen.
yeah.
So as a result, men that drink regularly, apart from actually making themselves much more female hormonally, they start to store fat in that pattern, which is why you see men with beer bellies and it's all hips and waist. There's nothing on the legs, there's nothing on the arms.
Yeah.
And that's the hormonal impact of having high estrogen and low testosterone.
Is that the same with cannabis as well? Because I did hear that it's estrogenic. Cannabis is estrogenic. I don't know if that's true or not.
It is, but to what extent, I don't think we truly know at the moment.
Right.
But
Okay.
yes, cannabis can definitely elevate estrogen levels and can have an impact on testosterone levels as well.
Right.
But even stimulants, so drugs like cocaine, that obviously massively affects us dopamine receptors. Dopamine is linked very heavily to a female hormone called prolactin. And when cocaine gives you a dopamine rush, which is why you feel good on it, there is unfortunately a little bit of a dopamine low afterwards,
Yeah.
which can cause a spike in prolactin, which can give you low test like feeling and emotionalness and erectile problems and things like that. Same with things like ephedrine or amphetamine based drugs. They will lower testosterone just because of the huge amount of stress they place on the body.
Right. Got you.
So there's so many impacts that can affect our test levels. Now, I wouldn't expect amphetamine use if you were a casual user or marijuana use if you were a casual user to get you to the point where you'd need TRT.
Right.
But it would potentially take the edge off things, definitely, yes.
So it could contribute if you were living
If
that
you
kind
had
of
other
lifestyle.
factors, yeah. And
Yeah.
very often it is a totality of lifestyle that is the problem.
Yeah.
Rather than one single item. It's lots of little items that all add together to create an issue.
So could you go into the HCG, the human chorionic gonadotropin as well?
Right. So there's two sort of levels of use of HCG. So the first one is, in order to do this, I'll have to explain the hormone journey, so to speak. So
Yeah, that's great.
hormones start with a hypothalamus in the brain. And the hypothalamus produces GnRH, which is gonadotropin releasing hormone. That then stimulates a pituitary gland, which sits underneath the base of the brain and actually looks like a pair of testicles. And that produces FSH and LH. FSH is follicle stimulating hormone, and LH is luteinizing hormone. They travel to the testes. FH stimulates the Sertoli cells to produce sperm. LH stimulates the Leydig cells to produce testosterone. There are feedback sensors up and down this endocrine system. So pituitary senses hormone levels, hypothalamus senses hormone levels, and there's even localized inhibins within the testes themselves that will shut production down if levels get too high locally.
Right.
Now, if you have a problem with signal output, and I always get it mixed up, you've got hypergonadism type 1 and type 2, and I can never remember if type 1 is bad signal or if type 2 is bad signal. So I apologize for that. I just always get confused on it.
No, it's fair.
But if you have poor signal, then HCG therapy is a potential viable treatment, because it's not that your Leydig cells aren't working, it's just that they're not getting told to turn on.
Right.
So you mimic LH by using HCG. Now, most people, when they start by the way, there's a caveat there though. HCG, if you take too much, will actually desensitize those cells so they don't work properly.
Right.
They will recover, but it means stopping for a period of time, usually about 4 to 6 weeks, to get them to recover.
Right.
Now, most people who have suffered with low testosterone, when they go on to actual testosterone therapy, they feel much better. Obviously, that's the goal. There are a few people that don't.
Right.
Test levels may be fine, but they still feel like they've got brain fog. They still feel a little bit fuddy in the head. There are HCG receptors in the brain. So it is, in those cases, viable to add a low dose of HCG to run alongside the testosterone replacement therapy to improve the general well-being of the individual. The other time when HCG would generally be integrated is if, even with normal testosterone levels, estrogen levels are low.
Right.
Because HCG itself converts to estrogen.
Right.
So you can elevate estrogen levels without pushing testosterone levels into ranges that are too high by implementing the use of HCG alongside your TRT.
That makes sense.
They
use, just to add something there quickly. Sorry. Just I'm sure they use HCG, don't they, for IVF? Is it?
Well, that's what I was just getting to as well.
Oh, sorry, mate.
Okay, so within the testes, we have these two types of cells: Sertoli cells and Leydig cells.
Yeah.
Now, what they call ITT, which is intertesticular testosterone, will actually stimulate the Sertoli cells to produce sperm, even in the absence of FSH.
Right.
Okay. So when someone goes on a steroid cycle, their FSH and their LH output stops because the feedback loop senses higher hormones and stops making them, because your body's going, oh, I've got too many hormones here. I won't make any till it comes back down. That's effectively what it does. But people still get their partners pregnant, even though they've got no signal flowing at all to produce sperm. And that's because the testosterone itself will trigger the production of sperm.
Right.
Now, when you go on TRT, your body senses that hormone levels are correct, or even slightly higher than correct. And as a result, the output of the signal hormones diminishes and eventually stops. It's what we term as shutdown.
Right.
That means you've got no FSH. So the signal going to the Sertoli cells to produce sperm is low, because you've only got what your Leydig cells are producing in the form of testosterone, which isn't a huge amount. So by the implication of HCG, we also elevate intertesticular testosterone levels, which in turn then stimulate the Sertoli cells, and as a result of that, increase sperm production.
Right. Okay. I didn't know that.
So that's the mechanism at play. So that is why, for fertility purposes, very often TRT will run HCG alongside.
Excellent.
So it all depends where you are in age and life as to what you're trying to get out of whatever the treatment is you're doing.
Let's do a little kind of thought experiment. So let's say someone's listening, they're in their early 50s, they're starting to see some of these, these things you've mentioned, the depression, maybe, lack of sex drive, but what would be the best thing for them to do just to start that? Just get bloods done first and then go from there.
I know this sounds like I'm touting for business because I run a blood testing company, but there are loads of blood testing companies out there now.
Yeah.
Private testing is very accessible and it's not particularly expensive. I mean, there's my company Eval, but there's Youth Revisited, there's Medichecks, there's Truvia. The list goes on. There is a lot out there now. So I would be more tempted to seek private testing.
Yeah.
Because not only can you then specify, I want total test, 3 tests, FSH, LH, and estrogen.
Yeah.
But then if you then decide, when you see where your levels are, if you are subclinical, so you're below range, when you go to the doctors, you're already halfway there. Here's the proof. I've had my tests done. This is where I am.
Yeah.
He will most likely insist on doing another test
Yeah.
And he'll want you to do it fasted at 8:30 in the morning because it's when your test levels are the highest they can be.
Yeah.
If you want to play him at his own game, just nick a couple of whiskeys the night before. Your test is going to be low that morning.
Yeah.
But they will try and create an artificial scenario. And quite literally, I have seen people that are 0.1 and 0.2 of an nmol just inside the lower limit at peak time in the morning, and doctor's gone, well, you're in range, you're fine.
Well, this is the thing that I find
damn
frustrating.
well they're going to be low for the rest of the day.
And also, this is something that you commonly get. I know I've experienced it. You don't hear back from the test, then you ring up the surgery and they say, oh yeah, you speak to the receptionist. The receptionist becomes an instant doctor and tells you all your bloods are fine and all your readings are fine. You go, well, okay, all of them, they're all perfect, are they? I mean, I had to ask for mine to be sent email to me so I could read them properly myself, and exactly like you said, they were barely scraping over.
There's a few reasons behind this. Whether it's right or wrong, the facts of life are fairly simple. In order to take you on for TRT, that's them committing to managing you for drugs for the rest of your days.
Yeah.
That's a big commitment and a big responsibility. Because there are areas of concern around TRT, GPs only like to prescribe when it's in black and white. This is what you do. So with testosterone levels, when they are subclinical, which is below range, that's a green flag to a doctor that he has no responsibility in prescribing you that testosterone, because that is the approved treatment for being subclinical.
Yeah.
When you are not, even if you're only just in range, then the responsibility becomes the prescribing doctor's.
Yeah.
Because he's making a decision to put you on a drug that is outside of the parameters of what's currently standard procedure. Even though you might feel like absolute arse and have every symptom going and have the poorest quality of life, and the fact that a test level of even 8 or 9 is going to have a significant impact on your health long term.
Yeah.
But it means them taking responsibility for prescribing of that drug, where if you're out of range, they have no responsibility, because that is what you do. That is the standard practice. That is what's, established in medicine. Low test, out of range, you qualify for TRT.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of why they avoid it. The irony is that the same doctor in a private practice will give you tests when you've got a level of 11 and 12.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just how it is. And it's a lot of it is down to litigation and responsibility and liabilities based around that. I mean, we work with lots and lots of people that are on NHS prescribed TRT, and they haven't had a blood test in 2 years.
Yeah.
And it's so they're taking responsibility of coming to us to get there. We developed some blood testing packages purely around TRT because the NHS were failing to deliver it to the, their customers effectively that needed it. But yeah, it's frustrating, and it can be annoying, and a lot of it boils down to the doctor.
Yeah.
Now, I have heard that there is movement within endocrinology that they are arguing that we should be a little bit more understanding around male testosterone levels and the effects that they have. But that's not going to filter down to GPs for a very long time.
No.
The other way around this, if you want to go through the NHS route, is that you go to your GP and insist on a referral to endocrinology.
Right.
Because you can self-refer. And you can demand your results. And yes, they are absolute swords for you ringing them up and saying, have you got my blood result? Yeah, everything's normal. Well, what's normal?
I've had that done myself.
It's all in range. No. Send me them.
Yeah.
No, it's the law. Send them me.
Yeah.
I've had that loads of times.
You have to really insist. They'll really try and palm you off.
I've had a receptionist tell me when I've had blood, yeah, your bloods are normal. I've got kidney failure, love. How the hell are my bloods normal?
Yeah.
They just haven't got a clue.
No, and also you don't want to. I mean, you'd like to think it wouldn't happen, but you never know. They could be caught. You'd caught them at a lunch break, and they've just gone, "Oh yeah, you're fine."
Yeah. No, I mean, we're human beings. Mistakes happen.
Yeah.
You know, with the greatest will in the world, accidents do happen. Things do get labeled. You know,
Yeah.
accounts get mixed up. So you know, even as a private practice, we have to keep super hot on that.
Yeah.
Because it's, especially if you know, if you've done at an event and you've done 50, 60 set of bloods, you only need someone to not write the name quite clearly on a vial or something else, and you're starting to go, who the hell's is this?
Yeah.
You know, so you know, mistakes do happen, but I would always ask for results. You have every right to them.
Yeah.
And blood testing isn't cheap. It's not the cheapest thing to do, and hormones are particularly expensive to test for. But if I said to you, the MOT of your car is going to cost you 120 quid, which is what we charge for a full hormone panel, you wouldn't really get upset at that, unless it was brand new. But you know, I mean, you're not going to really, but you won't spend that on maintaining your body.
Yeah.
And it's just our priorities are messed up that way. You know, we tend not to spend money on our health, but we'll spend it on a phone or a watch or clothes or whatever else it may be, and forget that actually none of that means jack if I don't have the quality of life. You know, as long as, you know, if I don't have the quality of life that should go with it. And obviously low hormones will severely impact the quality of your life.
Yeah. Have you seen a big influx of new customers coming in through you? Is the word getting out there that this is actually a thing? Because even recently, testosterone, you know, replacement therapy was seen as a bit of an you know, outlandish thing to worry about.
It's a huge growth business at the moment. There's a lot of companies moving forward.
Yeah.
And Newman, through their big corporation companies, but actually they've done a huge amount to make people aware.
Pretty slick, isn't it, as well?
Yeah,
They've kind of gone in on quite a slick angle.
Now, unfortunately, at the moment, there is a European-wide shortage of Testosterone, which is the sort of standard testosterone replacement drug that you usually go for.
Yeah.
Which is causing problems. Even the NHS don't have any.
Oh, right. Wow.
So they're pushing everybody onto Enanthe or Nebido. Nebido is a testosterone supplement injection that lasts 8 to 12 weeks, depending on the individual. Sustanon is injected every 2 weeks, where Enanthe or Cypionate, which are different esters of testosterone, so they have different amounts of time they are active in the body. They tend to be either weekly or bi-weekly injections. So it depends on the individual and how they are and what they want to do. A lot of people are scared of injecting. And then obviously there's daily application of gels.
Are the gels as effective? Because
they can be. They can be.
He tried the gel and he got such a poor result from that. And also, I'll tell you quite a funny story. He rang me up in a panic, saying his testosterone was like 20,000 or something. And what had happened was he'd done the pinprick but not washed his hands properly, so he'd had the gel on his hand and then tested it.
I've just had the same. So there's a in HRT. The UK's never been particularly good at prescribing testosterone, though sometimes it is needed in HRT. Over recent years, more and more women are actually getting low dose, the very weak HRT testosterone gel, on top of their HRT tablets. And we have someone did a finger prick. I only got the results back yesterday, and her test level was 96.
Wow!
And I'm like, you sure you haven't got any on your hands? So I need to deal with that today. But yeah, you can get contamination. Gels, I know some people that get on with it really, really well. I know others that have really struggled with it, and they've ended up having to go on to injections. It's very much down to the individual, really, or, you know, what suits you and your lifestyle.
Yeah.
You know, some people are terrified of needles, and even with practice and care, they just can't bring themselves to do it. So sometimes the gels are the only option, but they can be good. They've got a bit of a bum rap, and I don't think it's particularly fair, because from a point of view of a natural replication, they're the closest you're going to get.
Right. Okay.
Because you apply the gel in the morning, you get a peak, and then it drops off as the day goes on.
Right.
Which
okay.
is as close as you're going to get to what happens naturally.
And because it's a daily thing, you get a daily cycle. Yeah. Okay. Never thought of it like that.
So it is actually the closest to natural, and it's the one that causes the least amount of problems.
Right.
but people's absorption rates and such like do vary quite significantly. You can get two people, same dosing. One will sustain a test level at peak of in the 20s, and the other one might be struggling to reach 13 or 14.
Well, I was just thinking logically that if you've got quite a lot of adipose fat under your skin, is that going to affect the absorption?
Yes. So there's three causes actually. So the first thing is when you inject or push testosterone into fat cells, it's released much, much slower.
Yeah.
The other factor is that fat cells have androgen receptors, so they can actually tie up testosterone molecules.
Oh, okay.
And the third thing is that people who have higher levels of body fat have higher levels of aromatase and convert testosterone to estrogen at a greater rate.
Yeah.
So all these factors can play into it when somebody's got greater body fat.
Right. Interesting. So maybe not such a good idea for someone. Maybe they'd be better off with the injector. Is that what is that?
Yeah, it's no. I mean, they'd be better losing weight. And I know that sounds awful, but it is the truth of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, things like probably something like the Nebido would work better for them.
Right.
Because it's such a controlled, sustained release, they're not going to have the peaks that get off the faster acting injections.
Right. Interesting. Oh, this has been fascinating, mate. Thanks. I think we're about 40 minutes in now, roughly. So I'd like to just get you to give us a little breakdown of what your company offers, because I want to give you a little nod that direction, because there's also do you have a presence online with social media, that kind of thing? I'd like to get those off you as well.
Yes, we do.
Right. So if you want to fire those over, I'll put them in the show notes as well.
I will. My daughter handles that, so I'll get her to send all the links over to that.
Yeah,
I'll get to it via WhatsApp. But
just give us your company as well. There, give us what was it?
So the blood testing company is Eval Blood Analysis, which is www.evalbloodanalysis.com. We offer blood testing and IVs and bloodlets.
Right.
We have various clinics up and down the country. They vary from clinics within gyms, standalone dedicated clinics, to clinics that our staff operate out of their own homes. And we have a mobile unit that goes around the gyms as well.
Fantastic.
I think furthest north we are is Fife. Furthest south we are is sort of Exeter, Bournemouth, Southampton.
Oh, right. Well, that's pretty fair, so.
Everything can be accessed via the website. And then if somebody's interested in the TRT stuff, they'd have to go through Eval and provide blood testing, and then we could look at that possibly as well.
Excellent. Fantastic. Thanks for that. That was really interesting, just from my point of view, and hopefully for the listeners as well. Much appreciated, Dave.
Thank you very much.
If you enjoyed this episode of Mature Muscle, please subscribe and find us on most social media. Until next time, stay shredded.